I'm Carol Fitzgerald from BookReporter.com, and we're here today talking to William Kent Krueger about his Cork O'Connor series. Kent, welcome to our offices. It's so nice to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, Carol.
Really nice to have you here. For those who may not be familiar with the Cork O'Connor series, can you give them some background on it?
Sure. Cork O'Connor is, in my estimation, a unique protagonist in the genre. He is a man who straddles two different cultures. He's part Irish and he's part Ojibwe. The series is set in northern Minnesota, and so I use the Ojibwe culture significantly. And at the heart of the series really is the conflict that has gone on for ages between those two cultures, white and Ojibwe. And I use Cork O'Connor to mirror that conflict because he's a man who's never quite sure who he is really, nor is the community in which he exists. He's never quite white enough for the whites, nor is he quite Ojibwe enough for the Ojibwe. It's a very classic series in the genre in that there's always profound mystery at the heart of the work. There's a lot of suspense, a very modern thing with suspense going on in the series. And it's also, I think, unique in that it's a series that has family involved in it. Cork's not a loner protagonist. He has family. So there are a lot of, I'm able to bring into the books the discussion of a lot of these kinds of values that go along with family.
So when you chose to use the Native American legend, lore, and culture in your work, you made a conscious decision that you were doing this. Why?
Tony Hillerman is one big reason. My father was a high school English teacher, so quite honestly, here's a confession here. I wasn't a big reader of mysteries before I began to write them, but about the time I sat down to write the first book in the series, a book called Iron Lake, a friend of mine who was a huge aficionado of mysteries said I should read this guy named Tony Hillerman. So I read Hillerman, who, for those who aren't familiar with his work, writes the Jim Chi Joe Leaphorn series that deals significantly with the Navajo culture in the southwestern part of the United States. And I was just blown away with what he was able to accomplish with the books. It appealed to me in large measure because when I was kicked out of college, but while I was there...
And what college was that?
That was Stanford University. I've always thought it was much more interesting to say that I was kicked out of Stanford than that I graduated from Stanford. But while I was there, cultural anthropology was my major. So the idea of building a series around a unique culture, the Ojibwe culture, was terrifically appealing to me, and the idea that then I was going to have to do research in an area that fascinated me anyway was just like some other cake.
So how much of you is in Cork? Character, is there part of you in him, or?
I get that question a lot, and I think it's because Cork is a compelling and very decent protagonist. I'm a pretty compelling and pretty decent guy. The truth is that who Cork is, how he sees the world, comes a lot out of my own perceptions and reactions to the world. Cork believes in family. Cork believes in justice. Cork believes in making commitments in life and standing beside them. Those are all values that I also hold to. There's a lot of difference between Cork and me. Cork O'Connor is an Irish name.
Right.
Krueger is not Irish. Cork is profoundly Catholic at this point in the series. I'm a Methodist kid, raised Episcopalian. Cork has a significant connection with the Ojibwe community. He has Ojibwe blood in him. I have no Ojibwe blood in me. Cork was for a very long time in law enforcement. I spent the night in jail once. So we're very different in many ways, but Cork's response to the world honestly comes out of how I respond to the world.
Mm-hmm. So did the story have definitive arc to it? Does it have, when you set out at the beginning, did you say, wow, you're writing a series here, because I'm writing a book, and then I fell in love with this character and I wanted to keep writing him?
I wish I could say that I had a series in mind. I was just writing a book that might be good enough to get published. What I found was about halfway through Iron Lake, the first book in the series, I discovered that I was writing relationships that were going to be so complex, I couldn't bring them to a neat end at the close of this book. And when I thought about it, I thought, it's going to take me probably 3 books to bring everybody in particularly in the familial relationships in Iron Lake, to the place I want them all to be. And so I began then thinking about it as a 3-book sort of story arc. At the end of 3 books, this is where Cork and his family and all those important to him want to be. So that was the first arc I thought about, and when I reached the end of the 3rd book, which was Purgatory Ridge, it was wonderful. It all worked out the way I had imagined. But the problem was is that I didn't have any more stories to tell. So I began thinking about where does Cork go from here, and from that point on, really, it's been more a book-by-book consideration. Cork and his family age. Their relationships change as the children grow, and Cork and his wife are in a different place in their relationship. So very much now I look at what's going on with Cork and his family, and where's that going to take us in maybe the next book, or even now the next couple of books.
Then do you age him year by year as you write year by year? Does he age? And I'm just saying this because I know I've spoken to a number of authors that said, if we keep doing it like this, they're going to turn 80, and it's not going to be pretty, and they're not going to be able to get out there and do these shooting scenes anymore. This is not going to happen. So does he age?
He aged pretty much chronologically in keeping with how the books are constructed and when they actually come out. When I wrote the series, I began writing the series in the early 90s, and Cork at that point was 40 years old. Now I've taken him essentially, if you really are tracking this, if you read or tracking the series, we're into the early 2000s, so 2001, 2002. I never mentioned 9/11 because I don't want to set it that significantly. So Cork is aged approximately 7 or 8 years. His children have also aged appropriately. Their relationships have all changed. So I try to keep track of that as much as possible. But I got to tell you this: if you're really an astute reader of the series, and you look very carefully, you'll see that occasionally I stumble. For example, I think Stevie, who's a little character in the book, spends 2 years in the same grade, and not because he's particularly slow. It was my problem.
And did readers write and tell you this?
Indeed, they did.
Exactly. It's that and getting the weapon wrong. You get weapon wrong, and you get the age thing wrong, and they're there to tell you. You made a mistake.
Bingo.